is that, kind of like what we did with the database last week, once the students have created the content and put it in there, then like the whole rest of the class could look through it and you could trade back and forth and you could, sort of say, go look at what the other group did or comment on it, things like that. So I know group 3, you're still finishing up the last page. So I'm going to jump right into group 4. I'm not going to play the whole video because I don't think we need to, but just so that group 3 gets a bit of a sense of what it was. So this was I think a math project was what it was supposed to be in the end. And it's basically like creating a math aquarium where I guess the kids fish out things out of the aquarium, math problems, and have to answer them. So, yeah.
Hi everyone, we are from Turlock State University College of Education, Class B N21D. My name is Agarla and I have my groupmates here. This is... Hi, I'm Ruby Camille. And we have... Hi, I'm Sue. Also we have Andrea Caril Guevara from behind the scenes. Say hi, Andrea.
Hi.
Okay, so have you heard about the Med Aquarium? It is actually a traditional instructional materials which can be used by...
And I'll skip ahead a little bit here. They do a whole intro, but...
Design paper, color of your choice. And here I printed some pictures. We will use them to design our aquarium later. We also need plastic cover.
What's that?
Is that you playing with the audio?
Hands off. So you might get a sense for group 3 a little bit of maybe what group 4 might have noticed on this. So yeah, so it's one of these how-to videos. So they kind of go through the whole process and they create this thing and then give a little demonstration of it at the end. So, all right. So, in terms of strengths, and here's one of those comments, you're in trouble when the first thing is, well, they were super enthusiastic. Like, you're really kind of scraping the barrel there if that's where you're starting with your comments. Good job of showing materials. They seem to be having fun. So, the personalization side, maybe we could say, well, yeah, we were seeing people do it. They were enjoying what they were doing. So that will help to engage others who want to do this. However, on the flip side of that, as you heard, one of the biggest issues on this was sound. And we are going to talk about sound in a couple of weeks. But this one, the volume's inconsistent. They had music playing underneath the entire video. And that's okay as long as the music never gets in the way of the spoken word. And that happens almost through the entire video. And it's a combination of the music being a little too loud, but then also they didn't do a good job of setting themselves up for success for recording the audio. So the spoken word was quieter than it should have been, and the music tended to be louder. And even though whatever software they were using was sort of trying to duck the music down whenever the voice talked, it wasn't doing it enough. So even when it would duck down and then it would suddenly get louder again, and that becomes distracting when the music's like doing this and it's really noticeable. There were no additional graphics. Transitions were inconsistent. Yeah, if you use iMovie, they give you a library of like 20 different transitions you can use. My wife and I have a motto: just because you can use a transition, don't feel you have to. What happens is people like try to use all 20 transitions in a video. Pick one and use it through the whole video, or just don't use transitions at all. Segments were relatively long. 2 small black dots on the video. I hadn't noticed that. Was that?
Oh God, yeah, they're the worst.
Like big dots, or like looks like pieces of dust?
If you look at the very beginning of the video, it almost looks like it looks like she has a bug on her face. Yeah.
Oh, so this here.
Yeah, and there's one right on her.
And that there.
So
So I had not noticed those before. My guess, yeah, my guess is that's something on the lens of the camera that they didn't know was there. Yeah, so all
That's
right.
all I saw for the second
You
half.
can't unsee it.
Yeah, once you know it's there. So yeah, so suggestions, really the audio, just improving the audio on this would have gone a long way, I think, to making it a better video. So I agree with that. Yeah, in terms of content, they don't actually do a good, even with that whole long introduction, they don't really talk about the purpose of the use of this thing. And in the end, they don't really give a good demonstration of actually how you use it once you've made it. So it's a lot about the arts and crafts part of it. Maybe they have another video where they actually show how to use it, but it didn't seem like it. Yeah, and speeding up. And that's a very common trick to use for all sorts of process videos where you don't want to use the time. But they seem to use it in weird spots. They sped through some things, but not other things. And you were left going, well, why didn't they speed through that? Because we didn't really need to watch that. But then they did speed through this, where maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more there. Yeah, and the 2 black dots. And unfortunately, once they're in there, some software, you would be able to go in and try to isolate something like that and eliminate it. But that's really hard to do once it's in there. So it's better to get it right the first time rather than having to go back and fix it. All right, so any other things the two of you want to add to your experience with this stellar video? So, not really. We've said everything we could say.
Yeah.
All right, so group 3 had, and I don't know the background behind this, but I heard you guys talking, and I would agree. My sense is this was maybe like a high school business class or a video class at a high school having to come up with something to do for an instructional. So they're talking about work etiquette and things like that. So it's interesting. So
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jimmy. Jimmy just got a new fancy job at a fancy office doing paperwork and other business-like things. Say hello, Jimmy.
Hi.
But Jimmy, do you know how to appropriately behave at work? Not to worry, Jimmy. With my help, you'll be a model employee.
now, right off the bat, from the previous video, what is one thing we can appreciate about this one?
The voice and music are appropriately leveled.
Yeah, the voice is really clear. You can, when people put music in a video, I think they respond to sort of the dramatic impact the music makes. But it is almost the case, you almost can't make music too soft in a video, especially if it's meant to be instructional. We will know there's music happening back there, but the minute the music takes the focus away. So always err on the side, if you're going to use music, of making the music softer. And they've made the voice really prominent here. Now, what helped them is that whoever's doing the voice is probably not here on camera. They recorded that voice, it sounds like, in a studio where the person's this close to the microphone, so they can get a really good quality of voice. So that's something to keep in mind. So
This is Zawatsky.
So,
He's not a very good employee. Don't follow his example, Jimmy. We'll check in with you later, Zawatsky.
whatever.
now, however, whenever their actors are talking, there's a real difference in the levels there. So there's actually something, if you're a movie buff and you like to watch the end credits of movies, you'll see ADR listed as like a whole area. There'll be ADR recording, ADR artists. It's called auto dialogue replacement. For most movies, especially if they're action movies, what you're hearing the actors say is not the recording of them saying it when they shot the movie. Because it's so hard to control the sound environment, especially if you've got explosions going off and all this other noise. So they'll record the actors so that the actors can hear what they said and how they said it. But then they bring the actor back into the studio afterwards, and they essentially have the actor lip sync themselves. And it's kind of a tedious process because you usually have to record a line multiple times until you exactly match the character and everything. But there's a whole thing behind the scenes from one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies where they're having the battle on the deck of the ship, and there was no way they would be able to record the actors' voices in that environment. They had wind machines going, they had explosions and squibs going off, they had machinery tipping the ship around. And so they grab what they can, and then they've had the actors come back and re-record all their dialogue later. But that's something, if you're really worried about it, that's something they could have done here, is had the actors come back and re-record the voices. So, all right, I'll jump ahead a little bit.
Okay, Jimmy, the next tip to making a good first impression is to show up to work on time. Arriving on time shows that you care about your work and are responsible. Wait, where's Zwatsky?
So you kind of get the thing. They go through a whole series of, yeah, there's Zawadzki. So, so appropriate and inappropriate behaviors and a little bit of humor.
Way to take initiative, Jimmy. You'll get that.
Oh, sir. Is there anything you need done? I'm glad you asked, Jimmy. Could you make a few phone calls for me? Yes, I can. How many? Like 10.
Way to take initiative, Jimmy. You'll get that promotion in no time. I wonder what Zawadzki's doing. Looks like somebody won't be getting any promotions. Let's
All right. Anyways, so that was the other instructional video. So strengths video was short, segmented well. So they did have this, sort of the thing they would go through. They would present a topic, show the positive version of it, show the negative version of it, and kind of move on. So there was a nice sequencing to it. Voiceover was dull, however, seemed to fit the satire of the clip. So, and I heard you guys having some discussions of that, and there were some differing opinions on that. What do you guys think for the two that weren't watching this? How did you respond to the narrator's voice?
I thought it was almost clippy, but I was at least able, especially coming from what we were listening to, it's super clear and able to follow.
But the from an acting standpoint, did you find the voice appropriately interesting? What is it?
Seemed very Ferris Bueller's teacher.
Okay. Yeah, because this group was having that discussion, and there was some but it's appropriate for the video. It kind of fits the mood of the video.
Yeah.
So, generally entertaining. Yeah, and then let's see. So for weaknesses, some variety in terms of voiceovers, purposely monotone, but could have used some changes. All right. Did not state the purpose of the video initially. So that would have been good, an advanced organizer of some sort, especially from an educational standpoint. We know how that can kind of pre-tune the viewers' brains to what it is they're going to be looking at. Intent was not always clear. Video satire or instructional. So comment on that just a little more.
So our discussion was because by the end, at first, okay, it's going to be maybe a video from a class to teach kids how to behave in workplace. Right? Then by the end, we were talking it would just seem more goofy. And I was trying to figure out, was it more a class project and kids were just kind of being funny about it, or was it an actual video where kids would take notes and learn from it?
Yeah.
So we started to lean more towards a satire because I was by the end, I feel like I lost that sense of purpose.
Gotcha.
And I was watching it more for entertainment, laughing at what was going on, not taking in the message.
Gotcha.
The good thing didn't always happen to the good version of the workplace.
That was
the
true.
kid that wore the tie,
Yeah.
At one point, somebody steals a stapler, and
Gotcha.
he didn't get the stapler back.
Yeah, so they're saying this is what you should do for good outcomes, and he goes up to the girl, asks for a stapler, and she's like, no. So it was wait a minute.
Yeah. So, all right. So some suggestions. Did have a good recap at the end, so that's good instructionally. State the intention at the beginning. We could have spelled strengths correctly. Yeah, that's the one issue with the wiki pages. I think once you've created the page, you can't edit the name, so you do have to be careful when you name the pages initially. All right. So again, just like we did with graphics, you could go to school and get a graduate degree in video design. The intent here is not to make you guys experts in the production of video, but to give you some things and to really try to focus on the things that are going to impact instruction the most. So if we can get you thinking about this, paying it, okay, I want to shoot this video because it's going to work well for this situation. Where am I going to shoot it? making sure that there aren't extra noises going on in the room. That can do a lot to improve the quality of a video. You know, planning ahead of time, really making sure that you know what's going to be there, what are they going to be looking at, when am I going to use graphics, when am I going to use voiceover, like that. Well, this one too, I think both of them would have benefited from occasionally seeing the narrator, maybe. You know, just getting that personal connection. So in the first one, not always looking at the people doing it, but occasionally when there's a moment for it, going back to the person who's narrating. And that might help to both break the content up, also to make a little bit more of a personal connection to the narrator in both cases, things like that. So just things to kind of park away in your brain so that when you are creating videos, you're hopefully creating ones that are as instructionally and educationally effective as possible. So any other sort of final comments or thoughts about any of this? Like I said, it does not take long. Go on YouTube and just type in instructional video or how-to video, and you're going to find a lot of good examples. I mean, there's companies out there now that have gotten into the business of making instructional videos, and they look very professional and they're very clean and the graphics are great and all of that. But then there's also going to be a lot that are not. And sometimes looking at those will almost give you better ideas than looking at the ones that are really super slick and produced. All right, so I think what I would like to do, because next week is really going to be more about producing, actually doing production work. Obviously, last week we didn't meet, so we didn't get that time in the lab. But my plan is next week to set aside a chunk of time where you can actually be working on video in here. So if you've got a piece of software that you're using or content you want to bring in, I'll have some time for that next week so we can kind of talk about that and the nuts and bolts of, well, how do I actually do this? I'm also going to talk a little bit about animation because there are some pretty good, easy to use, again, usually cloud-based websites. Powtoon is one that a lot of people use. Animoto is another one that a lot of people use, where if you want to go that route for whatever reason of creating animations of characters rather than actual people, they make it pretty easy to drag and drop stuff in and to create motion and things like that in animation. So next week will be more of a lab week on the actual creation. So I did have in this week's thing, and you can take a look at it on your own. I won't go through it now. I do have a page with some links to some online video production apps. If you don't have something on your computer already that you can use, Powtoon, there is a link here for Powtoon if you want to take a look at that too. Adobe has its online thing, which also does graphic design. Adobe, by the way, is moving all of their software online now to a subscription model, which ends up costing more than what it used to just buy the software. But yeah, so as long as you've got, this week, just let all the video stuff kind of percolate in your brains, and we'll talk more about it next week. So the last thing for tonight, and I do want to try to get you out of here on time, if not a little ahead, is, and this is really the main assignment for next week, is to go back to our technology integration plans. And the goal this week is going to be a needs assessment. My guess is that most of you have already had some experience through your schools of dealing with needs assessments. Maybe, possibly, not really. Okay, well, it's a good thing to know because ideally, any curriculum or anything that you're doing in a classroom should be based off of a needs assessment, because that's what's going to tell you where you are now, where you want to get people to, and then what sort of the gap is between the two. So it's always a good first step, and that's where you take standardized assessment data and you look at it and you say, wow, our students are only scoring 75 on this measure and we really need to have them at 85. Like, that's a needs assessment, and then that should be what's driving instruction, is something like that. So there's a lot on this page. I'm not going to read through it all right now. I just want to kind of hit the highlights because you guys can all read it later. But basically, now that you've looked at some technology integration plans, and that was the last assignment, you're going to really now start to be working on your own plan. I did get some questions over the last couple of weeks about sort of what should that goal be. And so I just wanted to take a moment to kind of really reiterate. I had you looking at what are probably mostly like school-wide technology integration plans. For this class, your scope should be much smaller. So think about an issue in your classroom, or maybe in your department, or maybe as wide as maybe a grade level or a subject area, that you think could probably be addressed through technology. All right. So that could be a piece of software that you want to start incorporating into your classes, or it could be a piece of hardware that is specific to what you teach, or something along those lines. Or maybe it's taking a piece of software that you already have, but you're noticing that the teachers in your department aren't really using the software in a way that's actually getting results. So maybe your technology integration plan is going to focus more on professional development sorts of things. So it should be something kind of at that scope. Don't be designing a one-to-one program for an entire school. That's way beyond what we're going to have time to do and deal with in here. So you're looking for something that you think you could actually, that might actually work. And maybe you have to do a little research. Maybe you don't know what's out there in terms of technology or a software or hardware or something like that. But that's what you should be focusing on. So what you're going to be doing this week is taking that idea and trying to perform a needs assessment based on that idea. So it could be, you know, my department has X piece of software available to it. And in talking to the people in my department, I've learned that only, I don't understand either, that only 3 of the 10 teachers are actually using that software in their classes. Okay, so that might be the issue that you're looking at. That's the problem you're trying to solve, is teachers aren't using the software that's available to them, or they're not using something that's available. So that's kind of what a needs assessment gets you. There's a link here. This is actually an official government website about how a needs assessment should be conducted, what should be in it. It's like 10,000 pages long, and there is a ton of stuff in there. As I say, the steps outlined are very detailed and depth. It's not my expectation that we're going to be doing a needs assessment at that level, but there are a few pages in there. I point out like pages 5 to 7 that kind of give a good overview of the needs assessment process and maybe some basic terminology related to it. So if you want to just kind of see what a needs assessment could look like. So then what you're going to be doing is, like you did in the first phase, is creating a Word document. We're doing these all as Word documents because in the end what you're going to do is basically take all of them and pull pieces out of each one to actually create your finished TIP. So this week, this is how it's going to break down. First thing is to identify whatever that issue is. What is it you want to focus on? And that's really going to be up to you. If you can make it something that really relates to what you do in the classroom, all the better. So give a brief description of what that issue is. That should come out of the last paragraph from the first piece you did. If you remember, the last paragraph on that one was, you know, give some ideas of things that you might want to focus on. So just kind of maybe build that out or focus that in a little bit. The second part of the needs assessment is you always need to know the population that you are working with. So give a pretty detailed description. If it's your students, how many students are going to be addressed or going to be targeted with this topic? What's their makeup? What age group are they? What's the subject area that they're studying? If you're doing more of a professional development thing, focus towards a faculty. Give some background on the faculty. How big a group are you talking about? What is their background already? What do they teach? You know, all those sorts of demographic kinds of issues. So just really make sure you understand who you're targeting here. So then a need is usually defined as the difference or the gap between what is and what should be. So the final 3 sections on this are basically going to target that. So the next section, look at what should be. Where do you want, what is the behavior? What is the end state? You know, I want 90% of the staff using this piece of software effectively in their classrooms. Something along those lines. So something you can identify. So if you're trying to link it to your actual school setting, you might need to do a little research, ask around, talk to people, talk to your students to try to figure out that. But basically, where do you want to be in the end? When you finish this integration plan and it's been put into place, what is the behavior or what is it that you want to see in the setting? So that is what it should be. Then look at where you actually are. What is the current situation? A lot of times in this stage, this is where people send out surveys, they gather data, all those sorts of things. Again, for the scope of this class, you might have to be a little more informal in terms of the current state. I'm not expecting you to go out and write survey instruments and deploy them and gather the data and all that. But if you can do something like that on a more informal level, our school has PLCs, which are professional learning communities. So each department gets together on a regular basis just to kind of go over stuff. So if you've got something like that where you can talk to people, or if you're dealing with your students, maybe throw a quick survey at them or something like that, just to get an idea of where they are already. And then if you can establish those two things, then you basically have your need. And that is the final bit of it. So, for example, if the goal is for 95% of a group to be able to do something, and the current state is that 65% can do it, then the need is for 30% of the target population to move themselves from can't do it to can do it. All right? So that's what you want to describe in the end, is what is that need? What is the gap that you are trying to bridge? Ideally stated as a goal, if you're familiar with the SMART format for goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound, all of that, that would be a good model to use in this case. You know, by the end of December, 95% of our staff will be able to use this piece of software at such and such a level. Okay. Now remember, we're not actually going to be deploying these plans. That's not the expectation. You are just developing the plan. But so you can kind of, this is kind of make believe in a way. But, you know, be realistic about it. If you were actually to do this thing, how long do you think it would take? When would you want to see results by, and what would those results be? Remember that the needs assessment, the goal is not how you're going to get there, but simply where you're trying to get to. So nothing in here do you have to start talking about what software you're going to use, what hardware you're going to use, how long it's going to take, what are the steps along the way, any of that stuff. It's really just about identifying the goal and the need. All right, so in summary, you know, here's the overview of it. Describe the general issue you're addressing. Tell us about your target group. Tell us what should be. Tell us what is. And then give us your kind of finely worked out goal and need. Save that using this name. My case would be Miller D TIP Phase 2. And then there is a Moodle assignment, just like you did the first one. Just attach that document to the Moodle assignment, and that will be that. All right. So questions on that? Yeah, I mean, the overview of this is the first step was for you to look at other TIPs and get a sense of what they are and how they work. Now what you're doing is starting to develop your own TIP, and starting that by figuring out what is the goal, what is it you're trying to fix with technology. If there's nothing to fix, or if there's something to fix but it shouldn't be fixed through technology, then don't try to fix it with technology. And I think that's one of the biggest issues I'm trying to address here, is that it's, oh, we have problems in our classes. Let's throw a laptop card in there. That'll fix it. But maybe that's not the need. The need isn't that. Maybe the need is that students need to be able to put a verb and a subject together. I don't know. You know, and maybe that is not technology. So that's the goal of this, is to make sure that whatever your plan is addressing something that is a real identified need, and that it can be addressed through the technology. All right. So that, just to finish up here really quickly then, so in terms of homework for next week, there is a new forum, right? I think at this point we've kind of exhausted the first conversation we had, although you can always go back and add to it. So the one this week kind of relates to what we've done the last few weeks. It's about graphics and video. I'm going to ask you to ask a question about graphics or video that you would like an answer to or want to get feedback on. And then we're going to start the conversations about that. And then beyond that, it's the needs assessment we were just talking about. And there's a link to the assignment page there. Beyond that, and this is just going to be an ongoing thing, keep working on your Moodles. You now have a basic understanding of how to get graphics in there. We've been through a bunch of different types of activities. If you want to start building any of those into your lessons, if you want to start playing around with some video, that'll be what we work on next week, is to start creating a couple of video pieces for the Moodle. But just continue to work on that. And like I said, now that I have links to your Moodles and I'm now enrolled, I can start to take a look at them and provide you some feedback with those. Oh, I should have put that here, and I meant to have you, I don't know if did I actually ask you guys to put a dialogue activity in? I meant to actually do that all together. I'll add it to this. If you can do that, just in the top section of the class Moodle you're developing, throw a dialogue activity in there. Go to add activity, dialogue, and just call it like instructor feedback or feedback, something like that. And then that'll just be a place where I can come in and leave comments for you, and you can respond with comments back. I think it's called dialogue, right? Yeah. So it should be an activity. Oh, wait. Chat is really like a chat room. Huh, maybe it's not in. No, probably you guys aren't still in it. Then in that case, click on feedback. Maybe that's what they're now calling. No, that's a survey thing. You know what? Just put in a chat. No, don't put in a chat. Put in a forum. I think that's going to be the closest thing. That's interesting. I thought we did have it. All right. Yeah, add a forum, because that's the same thing. I can still write things to you, and you can write to me, and we're the only people in your Moodle. So, so if you didn't do it right now, just at some point this week, add that in, just so I have a place where I can add commentary. All right. So we're doing okay. Nobody's panicking yet, or okay. Okay. Well, that's really all I got for tonight. We're basically 9:30. So we've got a bunch of weeks now in a row where I don't think, at least from my end, I shouldn't have any interruptions. So we should be on campus for the next several weeks and be able to kind of really get rolling on all this. So appreciate your flexibility last week. Maybe next week we'll actually have everybody here too, which would be nice.
We'll be back to full strength, or will we?
Yeah.
Seems unlikely considering the pattern.
Yeah. Well, you never know.